Well, as you can clearly see, my Jeepster project is slowly getting buried in dust and boxes. I wish I could say all these boxes were parts coming for the Jeepster. But I'm having a really hard time getting parts for the Jeepster, so I'm going to put it aside. This is going to be benched for a few months, probably till next winter, and I'm moving on to a new project. The family cabin needs a lot of work, and to do that work, I've got a new project that will tackle all of that. But I have to tackle the project first before I can use it. There's an interesting story that goes along with it. What was going to be my next project almost went off the side of the road on its side, and could very well have been the end of that project. So as you can see, I bought myself a backhoe. I found this backhoe about 45 minutes away from my home. It's about 2 hours away from the family cabin. The backhoe needed a lot of work. The price was about what a backhoe should be that doesn't need a lot of work. So after seeing it, after finding all the issues, luckily the guy wasn't firm on the price. He was honest about what it needed. Needed steering, needed brakes, all the front suspension is shot, kingpins, tie rod ends, but all the hydraulics are good except one line. So it's a fairly new transmission, fairly new engine. The engine is actually an upgrade over the actual 580D, which this is. It also has all new brakes, except for the master cylinder, so that's why the brakes don't work. And it also has a new hydraulic pump. Well, the steering issue is the pump to the power steering. That's gone, so it only works when it's not loaded. If you get the bucket full of dirt, you can't steer it. Well, I found out trying to get it in the backyard after it was delivered, I had a really hard time getting it into the backyard because the steering was so bad. And braking is a nightmare. I mean, this thing's 15,000 pounds, and to throw 15,000 pounds around forward to reverse and going through the gears trying to get this thing stopped and controlled is not a good situation. So I went to see the backhoe, and it was everything I wanted, especially the Extend-A-Hoe. I'm going to be reaching into the river, I'm going to be reaching into the ponds, and it's really nice to have that extra few feet on that extension. So I negotiated the price, we agreed. Along with that negotiation, what would you charge to deliver it for me? So 150 bucks to deliver it, which was very reasonable. It was a matter of about 2-hour drive, 1 hour of decent road, and 45 minutes of dirt road, and it's going up very high altitude. I'm going from about 4,500 feet to almost 8,000 feet. It had been raining. The dirt road, I mean, it's 14 miles of dirt road. The dirt road had been graded just the week before, so the dirt road was in great shape, but it was a little slippery, it was a little slimy. And after 45 minutes of driving on that, I think the guy was getting a little upset. And his wife was with him, and I know she was getting very upset because she told me, "Well, you didn't tell me it was going to be clear up the mountain." Well, he wasn't paying attention, he was getting annoyed, and he drove off the road. I haven't paid him yet for this thing, so if it tips over and falls off the trailer, it's not mine. Well, we got lucky. I went scouting out through the neighborhoods trying to find somebody that might have something heavy enough. There's a guy in the neighborhood that has a backhoe. Well, he wasn't there. Got a hold of him on the phone, wasn't planning on being there. So, drove up and down all the roads and just got lucky. There's a guy with a big heavy duty forklift up there. In this first attempt, we tried pulling the trailer back up onto the road with a couple of chains. And both chains failed and didn't even budge the trailer. And fortunately for the prior owner and for myself, he was able to get that trailer back up on the road. It was just one last bend in the road, and then it was up on a big flat spot where I was planning on having him unload it. So we were just a matter of feet from getting it there when he almost tipped it over. Well, unloaded it, drove it down to the cabin, and then I drove it back to the backyard. And here's a quick walk around and a little tell-all about this new project I have. Well, this time I'm rescuing something I've never worked on before. It's the biggest project I've ever worked on. It's been hell to get it here. This was an old construction vehicle. The hour meter shows 3,000 hours. That was probably 20 years ago when that stopped working. From the slop and the wear and tear on all the components of this thing, and the fact that it was being used by a general contractor, this thing's probably got 10,000 hours. Got a lot of wear and tear, a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect. To get it here where it sits, I should have videoed me actually trying to get it here, but it was so hairy, so white knuckling, so scary, I didn't bother to record any of it. This is up at the family cabin. There's a lot of work that needs to be done here. I'm hoping this machine is going to be good enough to actually do all this work. And let me grab the camera, we'll walk around it and I'll show you a lot of the issues that I have with this. So the good. A lot of these cylinders have been rebuilt, so not seeing a whole lot of leakage. There's some, but for as many hours that is on this machine, it's not bad. You can see though, a lot of these hoses need to be replaced, but as he always said, if it wasn't broke and everything was working, he left it alone and just kept going. Fairly new tires, so that's one of the real pluses. Those are about $1,000 a piece. The transmission is newly rebuilt. That was a $4,000 rebuild. You see he did replace some of the hoses. The steering in this is a mess. It is really sloppy. So that I need to figure out. Kingpin wise, this one's solid. That shaft has got a little bit of leakage. Not that big of a deal. A lot of these front shafts have been rebuilt. More nasty hoses. The bucket here on the front, he had just put a brand new blade across the front of it and had that welded on. That was 800 bucks. All of these joints on the front are in pretty good shape. They're fairly solid, not a lot of slop. He said this front piece fell off and he had to have that re-welded on. It looks like it's about to fall off again.
This one is an issue. You can see this kingpin. And this was really causing me fits trying to drive it back here. I'm hoping it's just a worn kingpin and not that arm. So that's going to be kind of a expensive piece if I have to replace this arm. You can see there used to be a grease zerk up here. It's gone. This is all really beat up. This is probably one of the most concerning pieces. I'm hoping that's not going to be too big of a deal. This knuckle for the spindle, those are fairly inexpensive, easy to get. Kingpins are easy to get. Having this either welded and rebored, sleeved, that's something that I'm going to have to look into. It's a 580D. New hoses on this side. That area up there, the hoses have a pretty good leak. And right at that bend, right there, it's been wearing against that other fitting, and that leaks pretty good too. And these are high pressure lines. Are they 3,000 psi or 1,000 psi? I'm not even exactly sure. So when that thing blows, it makes a big ass mess. And if you're sitting here in this seat when it goes, you're gonna get sprayed and it could damage your eyes. So that definitely needs to be fixed right away. And then the ram that goes down inside of this Extend-A-Hoe, that needs to have new seals in it too. So you can see this was all clean when I bought it. I took maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to drive it back here. There's a lot of leakage. That pin's pretty sloppy, but it's just the catch pin to hold this up in place. That catch pin actually goes all the way through and holds this whole piece in. You can see it's broken off, so it keeps rising up, and it was up pretty high when I went to buy it, and he says, oh, no big deal, you just tap that down with a sledgehammer. Yeah, well, if that works its way out and you don't notice, this whole thing falls off, or at least falls into a very precarious situation. A lot of these pins are sloppy. Again, it's like the front suspension. I hope those pins are just worn and not ovaling out any of the mounting points. It's the same with these on the bucket. They're pretty sloppy. A lot of movement. It doesn't look like it's the bucket or any of these pivot points, but you just never know till you start tearing it apart. When I looked at this, my first thought was, and I don't think it's worth it. He's asking $14,000 for it. $14,000 was just too much. Too many issues that I could see. It runs fantastic. And with the new transmission and the new tires, we kept going around and around and finally settled on $11,000 and $150 to deliver it. So I think I did pretty good, but we'll see. I'll keep you informed. We'll do some video as I start tearing this thing apart. Another major issue is it's got dual brakes, which is awesome, but they don't work. One, this one works, but it keeps sticking. It locks, and you gotta go from forward and reverse and forward and reverse until it unsticks. This one is your main brake, and it doesn't work at all. There's nothing. There's no pedal. You can pump it up on nothing. Got wires hanging under the dash that haven't been hooked up for years, covered with grease. I wanted to take the dash off so that I can inspect all the gauges, and I found out it's not even attached. But there's the Brake Master cylinders. They're fairly inexpensive, but all the wiring is a disaster in here. So that's all got to be looked at. This gauge cluster is fiberglass. As you can see, it isn't even bolted on. Hazard flashers doesn't work. Don't know what this is. It's not even hooked up. Horn button doesn't work. Signals doesn't work. It has a couple of lights on it. None of the lights work. The throttle, halfway to getting this thing here, the throttle just stopped working and it was just idling. Come to find out, the throttle linkage fell off inside of that compartment. So I had to diagnose that to get it back here. But turn it to start. Push the start button and ignore the wires. Runs fantastic. Story is it's a fairly new motor. The motor is actually out of a newer case. It's the bigger motor. This, I don't have all the stats. I'll look those up and I'll update as I work on this machine. But it's higher horsepower, higher compression, higher torque. So the engine and trans, tires, that's what really made this worthwhile. All the rest of this stuff I can rebuild. Most of this stuff is fairly inexpensive, but that front suspension could get pretty spendy. But we'll start tearing it apart. I'm going to start with tearing out that dash. And, oh yeah, that reminds me. Another really big issue. That steering column at the base is leaking fluid, and when I asked him about that, he says, oh, that's the power steering. The gear, left, right, push, pull, whatever you call it, is there at that base. When it is under load, it stops working. So I got this into the creek. You can see the creek over there. I had to drive through that creek, and when I got down in it, the steering didn't want to work anymore. It was turned hard to the left and it wouldn't budge. The only way I could get that steering to move was to rock it back and forth. Forward, reverse, till the thing finally started to turn, and then I was able to get it where I wanted it. Now let's go through a quick demo. So there you have it. My what have I done project. Well, I've got a lot of work here to do at the cabin. I've got 2 ponds. The dams are shot on both of them. They need to be dug out and replaced. And I've got many, many days of work here. So it made sense to buy this. I can put all this work into it. Hopefully, for every dollar I spend on this beast, I'll be able to get it all back when I'm finished with all these projects. But I'm probably looking at several years to do everything that needs to be done here. So, that's it for this project. Appreciate you tuning in. Give me a like if you like what I'm doing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for watching. Goodbye for now.